Divorce me once, shame on you. Divorce me twice, shame on me. Are you feeling the shame of multiple divorces? Or maybe you've only gone through one, or you're in the middle of your first one and you are still dealing with shame. This is a very common emotion and a very important thing to work through. Today's conversation is with Dr. Ann Morgan. She is a medical doctor and CEO and founder of Thrive Once More. We had an incredible conversation about shame, and I'm excited to share it with you today because I don't care how many times you've gone through divorce, there's shame. And it's important for your healing and for your ability to make better decisions in the future that you work through it, which is hard work, but very rewarding. So stay tuned. We're going to dive in.
Welcome to the Starting Over Stronger show, where you'll find help and hope for your divorce survival and recovery. Divorce well, live well.
Thank you, Dr. Ann Morgan, for being here. I would love it if you could just start by sharing with us a little bit of your story.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you, Annie, for having me. I always get a kick out of another Ann or Annie. Annie is my nickname from my family, so my dad calls me Annie. A few other people do, but I just love knowing other Annies. So I'm just pleased to be here and hope that I can offer some of the things that I've learned in my journey, and I'm looking forward to doing this.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the topic, is multiple divorces, and I've had two. It's a long story, and I won't go through the whole story, obviously, but just in the scaffolding of my story in relationships really started when I was young. I was dating someone that I then eventually married when I was 15, and it was not a good relationship, and I knew it, but I also didn't know what else was out there for me. I kind of had a little bit of, I would say a lonely relationship with my immediate family. Mm-hmm. And so having somebody at age 15 that was really into me somehow, it fed some sort of need for connection.
Yeah.
So it was a dysfunctional dating life with this person, and it was on and off again for years. And then I felt like as I got older, into my early 20s, I was becoming more and more confident, and I was becoming better equipped to kind of set some boundaries. So I thought I was capable of getting over that relationship. And then one night, and what we would do in our early 20s, I was single, and I had a good friend group, and I was in medical school, and I was really feeling better about life and my future. And this guy walked back into my life again, and some of those just stirred up some feelings of acceptance again. He got into my head again, and then shortly after, I was pregnant. And then when I was pregnant, I was told I needed to get married. And so I did, because I was really kind of a people pleaser. And to be honest, I took myself out of the equation of whether or not I should get married. I kind of just did it because I honestly believed it was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. I knew looking back that marriage was not going to last, but I was sure going to try because I am a hard worker, and that's the way I do things. I work really hard at making things right.
Yeah.
So that marriage really just lasted overall just 2 years, but we were separated most of those 2 years. And so I was quick to understand that it was a toxic relationship and that I deserved differently. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to develop the confidence to be out of that really abusive relationship, kind of emotionally abusive for sure, and physically abusive at times. And I felt empowered to be single. I was a single mother at that time, and I was a new doctor and in residency, and really just was looking for anything opposite of what I just experienced. I found it, and my second marriage happened fairly quickly because I was sure that since he was opposite of the person that I was married to first, that I was going to do just fine. That it was going to be a successful relationship. And I think that it was in a lot of ways. So my second marriage was in a lot of ways very successful. And even our divorce was successful. Like it's interesting. There was not a lot of drama in my second relationship. When we went to get a divorce, finally, after just deciding mutually that this was just done, we just used one attorney, and she said to us, "This has been the easiest divorce I have ever done, and can you all please teach a course on how to get divorced?"
Well, that's a good compliment.
Yeah, I mean, it was great, and it sounds crazy, but of course, there was a lot more to unpack than just the specifics of the divorce. The divorce was, technically easy. Now, what I think we'd like to touch on today is the shame of multiple failed relationships. And certainly there's a lot of shame that I carried in failing yet again in a marriage. And so that was different. I was able to separate that from my feelings about my second marriage ending. So I was able to do it better, at least as far as the surface looked like, but it really affected me kind of down deep. So that divorce happened almost 8 years ago now. So, it's been a journey since then, and one that I've learned a lot about. So, and I don't know what else you would like to know right now.
Well, we're going to break this down. So there's a lot of different parts to this. I mean, when you make a great point when you say that, just because the divorce process is easy doesn't mean the healing and recovery from it are easy. Those are two very different things. And, so I think that's something that we're going to talk about, and we'll get into the shame part of that even more. But I mean, the truth is, we talked about how, when we were trying to decide on a subject for today, we talked about a lot of different things, and the psychology of the shame around being divorced more than once is what we arrived at. But the truth is, as I really kind of did some research and thought more about it, I think the shame is the same whether you were divorced once or twice or 3 times or more. And maybe it gets worse as those numbers go up. But I think that in some ways it's there for everyone that goes through even one divorce. And so I don't want anybody listening that's not divorced 2 or more times to think they're not going to get something out of this today. And so I think what I wanted to start with is kind of trying to get at the heart of where shame comes from. And I wondered what your thoughts are on, just your own shame that you struggled with because of your divorces. What do you think was at the root of that?
Absolutely. That's a great question and a great point too. So absolutely, there's a shame that happens when we fail at anything, right? Whether it be marriage or parenting or, our careers, whatever we deal with, our failures can turn to shame if we allow that. My shame around the idea of being divorced multiple times, or even having failed in love multiple times, it compounds a little bit, but it's certainly powerful at each point, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you. I think that I really believe that the shame that I have allowed myself to feel over failing in this arena, as a lot of things do that we struggle with as adults, but probably comes from childhood. Childhood trauma, just not ever feeling accepted or truly seen. Growing up, I felt lonely, even in my own immediate family. And I think I mentioned this earlier, I think that has a deep-seated part in the shame that I've carried for many, many years until recently.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that in my own case as well. And I see that in my clients. One thing that you have said a few times that is so common, I hear it all the time, it's the F word. Marriage failed.
Yes.
That big fail. I have talked about this a few times. I've had a guest on the show that talked about a book. I wish I knew what book it came from. I would be glad to give them credit. But there is a book or a teacher or speaker who has talked about this and maybe has some kind of rights to this intellectual property. But it is just an amazing thought that I think everybody should know. And it is that relationships don't fail. They are completed.
I love that.
And when you really think about it, I mean, life is a journey and we are growing and changing all the time. And another thing that I've seen it go around on social media, never apologize for outgrowing someone who had the opportunity to grow with you. Every time I say it and think it and see it, it just gets me, because it's like, yeah, like it's one thing if you just, throw away a marriage, but I don't think a lot of people do that. I think a lot of people, especially women that I know anyway, tried really hard to make it work, way longer than they should have in a lot of cases. And when you get to that point where you just are done trying, it's not a failure. It's a completion. That person and that relationship has served its full purpose in your life. And it is time for something new now.
Absolutely.
And I think that alone takes away a lot of the shame when you are able to really digest that for what it's worth, What are your thoughts on that?
Very true. Very true. I think that really resonates with me. And what it made me kind of remember and think about is that the longer I've been out of these, I'll say completed now, not failed, completed relationships, is that what I recognize, I guess the shame that I continued to carry, even after I was truly kind of over the unique shame to each of those relationships, was that what's wrong with me that I'm not successful in this arena. And what I started to understand was that what I felt was not right about my relationships was my ability to have the self-confidence to choose correctly. And so I dropped that blame for anyone for not being the person that I wanted them to be. And I started accepting the idea that I actually hadn't waited for the person that I know would have been better for me.
I love that. That is so good.
Yeah, I recognize that is how I will then be successful with my next relationship if I truly gain the confidence, the awareness of what I absolutely will not compromise for. I will design my next relationship the way that I know I can be successful with it. So that was a powerful moment when I started to recognize that I could let go of the shame of those relationships, and I could let go of the idea that they just weren't the right person for me, when I recognized that actually I just chose the wrong person for me because I believe I deserved something better.
Yeah.
Yeah. That brought me a lot of awareness, and that work in kind of confidence has been life-changing for me.
Yeah. And, maybe you chose the wrong person, or maybe you chose exactly who you needed to teach you what you needed to learn so that you could complete that relationship and then move on to something that's more fulfilling in your future. I mean, I think there's reasons why we make the choices we do. We do the best we can with the information and abilities and knowledge that we have at any given time. And we can't expect to make great decisions with information that we only now have, but we didn't have then, right?
Absolutely. And as you say that, I kind of think about, the idea of regret. I really don't have regret about those relationships because I do value them for the way they've made me grow. And then I have two beautiful daughters, one from each relationship that I would never turn back.
Absolutely.
I would never do things because I've learned so much. Yeah.
And I think you use the word powerful or power, some form of the word. And it's so appropriate that you would have mentioned that, because that is something that I thought of when you were talking, that I talk about with all of my clients, that your power lies in your willingness to stop looking at the other person and to start looking at you. And that's not to assign you blame. It's actually the exact opposite. It's for you to just realize that there isn't any reason to place blame in one court or the other, but just to acknowledge the reality of what exists and to look at what you have the ability to change, which is only you.
Yes. Yes.
And that is where all your power lies. So, it's a very empowering and powerful place to be and to get to just decide someday, finally, to just go, you know what? I don't care what he did or she did. I'm done thinking about that, worrying about that. He or she can be whoever they are and whoever they want to be. But here's who I want to be, and here's what I want to do, and here's the kind of relationship that I want to have. And if I can't create that here, I'll go somewhere else where I can create it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, everybody knows romantic relationships are challenging. So it should come as no surprise that, divorce is inevitable in some situations. The thing that I wonder is, why does divorce come with such regret and shame when we are the people that are actually willing to admit that there's a problem or to not tolerate, that kind of dysfunction rather than staying in it for the kids or for financial reasons or for whatever reason somebody is rationalizing as to why they're staying in a bad marriage. It's weird to me because to me, I don't want anybody to have shame, but to me, there's more shame in staying stuck, doing something that's harmful to you, to your spouse, to your kids, and to anyone around you, than to just go, you know what? I can see this for what it is, and I'm going to do something different now.
Definitely. I agree with that. I was after, I guess it's kind of my MO to be out of one relationship and quickly into another one. And I recently ended a 7-year relationship that I started right after I was divorced the second time. And in a lot of ways, it was who I thought I was going to end up with. We were very, very connected. But when I recognized that there was some damage happening and that staying was at a cost of things like my self-esteem, it really awakened me to realize that thankfully we weren't married. And I think that there's a reason that we never got married. It was because there were red flags. But I was willing to stay. I wanted to stick it out because I really felt that there was some value in this relationship. I certainly felt like I was very connected to this person. But when I started to realize that staying was more detrimental than leaving, that's when I made that decision. And I really, looking back, feel like I made that decision in both of my marriages as well, because I'm kind of a hard worker. I work hard at things. And so in both of my marriages, I really felt like I had exhausted the work that I could do. And then that's when I woke up and realized this is causing more harm to my kids, to myself, to my partner. It wasn't just about me. It was really about recognizing that, like you suggested earlier, the relationship was completed and that there's more growth that can happen apart than what can happen together. So yeah, I like the way you phrased that.
Today's show is sponsored by Bag Lady Divorce, the tools you need to get your money through your divorce. Financial know-how delivered to you from someone with an actual personality. Dina A. Brown, certified financial planner and certified divorce financial analyst. You can do this. Get your head in the game. Divorce is basically a business negotiation involving money, and there are no do-overs. You have to get it right the first time because it is the only time, and you don't want to have regrets. Don't be overwhelmed by the financial requirements of preparing for your divorce. Get the help you need from an experienced certified divorce financial analyst. And then you won't have to worry about feeling like you're going to be a bag lady. Online classes, customized financial advocacy, and socially responsible investing to ensure your future. Find out more about Dina and Bag Lady Divorce at baglady.dina-brown.com. That's baglady.dina, DEANNA brown.com. Please tell her you heard about her on Starting Over Stronger. Yep. And, not to beat a dead horse, but I have to say that it's really important, I think, here to recognize that shame is corrosive. It's deadly. It's dysfunctional. It's just not good. And we've talked about that from several different angles. And that goes for whether you're still stuck in a bad marriage and struggling with whether or not and how to get out of it, or whether you've left or been left once or twice or 3 times or more. It's just such I don't even know the word I want to capture it. It's just such a terrible place to be.
It is. It really it's really a very powerful emotion. And it kind of pervades everything else you think. It starts that kind of negative self-talk reel that goes on in our brain. So when we're feeling shame, it pervades everything else we do throughout the day. One of the things that once I recognized that I had a lot of shame in my reel that I was thinking all the time, was And I recognize that every time I drop something, like whether it be I'm writing and I drop my pen, or I'm in the kitchen and I drop a spoon on the floor, I was actually angry at myself thinking, why am I so clumsy? I should be less clumsy. I should be more graceful. And I started to recognize that my shame about lots of things, but particularly about relationships, was really affecting every minute of my day. That was hard. I recognized that I just never felt joy when I was feeling shame in everything.
Mm-hmm. Do you know Brene Brown?
Oh my gosh.
You knew we weren't going to have this conversation without talking about Brene Brown.
Brene Brown. In fact, it's so funny, Annie, is just a few minutes ago when we were talking, or we were talking about reflecting on our part in things, I actually had written a Brene Brown quote down thinking, if I can use this, I'll use it. So I'm going to say it because
Use it.
And she says, loving ourselves through the process of owning our story is the bravest thing we will ever do. Mm-hmm. And that is absolutely the journey I've taken in the last couple of years. And it's been so empowering. It's changed my life.
Yeah. I don't know if you could hear it in my voice. I got a little giddy there for just a second. I have a little bit of a girl crush on Brene Brown. I kind of want to be her, but for now, I'll just talk about her and her work because, for those listening who don't know who I'm talking about, her name is Brene Brown. It's Brene, Brene. And she calls herself a shame researcher. I don't have a clue what her credentials are. I don't care. I've read her books and she's as credentialed as I need, because I know that she knows shame. And she, pretty much everything I know about shame comes from her. I started by reading Daring Greatly and then followed it pretty quickly with Rising Strong. And I've now read everything she's written. But it truly altered the course of my life for the better. And that's not an exaggeration. I learned from her that shame is prevalent in our society and maybe the whole world. I don't know if she was referring to the world or America, but she just talks about how it's in our schools, it's in our workplaces, it's in our homes, and it's being used as a teaching tool, as a parenting tool. There's just so many ways that it's just such a part of our culture, and it's to our detriment. It should not be. And I don't think anyone recognizes it for the danger and the detriment that it is and goes on doing it. I think it's something that happens without our awareness. And then when we come to understand it, we do differently, like so many things in life. But yeah, I've read everything she's written. I highly recommend her for anyone who's struggling with shame because, she has such a unique take on all of it. And it's so backed with unique research and just solid brain and social research. What have you read of hers and what are your thoughts on her work?
Oh, absolutely, Annie. I love, again, I have a girl crush too. I love Brene Brown. And she has been... So I discovered podcasting probably 3 years ago or so. Mm-hmm. My ex-husband used to always try to get me to listen to podcasts. He'd send me a podcast. And I'm like, no, I like my music. I don't need a podcast. So when I discovered Brene's podcast a few years ago, actually her latest one, what is it?
What is the one called that she just started during the pandemic?
I don't know. And so I really have learned the power of listening to that, breaking down. What she was able to do for me was to break that cycle of shame and to recognize it. Mm-hmm. One thing that she says is that shame cannot survive being spoken. It cannot survive empathy. So when you start to bring to light the places when you feel shame, and particularly when you share it with someone and they can empathize with you, then that shame kind of disappears. Now it's not an instantaneous thing. It's a thing that continues to require work and kind of listening to your gut so that when you start to feel it, you recognize it, but you can stop it. Because, she has been a super powerful person for me.
Yeah. And what you're talking about, I have a perfect example of. I was talking with one of my coaching clients just yesterday, actually, and we got onto this subject. And I had read something recently that really just hit me in a totally different way. And it was talking about how, when you're going through a divorce
it's wise to keep your circle small and to not share certainly intimate details, but maybe even the fact that you are going through a divorce with very many people, because the truth is it's not most people's business and it doesn't affect anything and they don't need to know. But for those in the small circle that you feel safe and comfortable, sometimes it still happens where somebody says something stupid and insensitive that, especially when there's a situation with a toxic relationship or abuse. And it just floors me sometimes, the stories, including the one I heard yesterday that somebody said to somebody who literally put shame on her for leaving a physically abusive relationship. And this person has been through a divorce. And I'm like, I can't wrap my head around being a divorced person and putting shame on somebody for going through a divorce for any reason, let alone for the reason of leaving an abusive situation. But people do it, and whether they mean to or not, whether they have any idea the power of their words, it is crippling sometimes. And that was what happened to my client. And I thankfully just read this recently, and it said, if you really want to offset shame, here's how you approach it. First of all, tell as few people as possible, because most people don't need to know. And two, when you have that conversation with people, address all of the feelings that you're feeling about your divorce in what you share with them across the spectrum by saying something like, I'm getting a divorce and here's why, and I'm really struggling with a plethora of emotions, and I run the gamut from being excited and happy and relieved to feeling deep shame and really struggling with this decision. And I just wanted you to know that it's happening. And I appreciate your support, or whatever it is else that you want to say. You've put it out there. So you kind of offset the shame that they might put on you by acknowledging that you're already feeling it.
Yeah.
And I thought that is so powerful.
I like the idea of not feeling like you have to share with everyone what's happening. I did that both times. I really was private about what I was going through. And for one, I'd already made my decision. I didn't need a lot of advice. Like, it was something that I didn't want to hear someone else's opinion about, because I was fairly confident in my decisions. But it also isn't, it's a private thing. And you're right to protect yourself a little bit. I think there's a very fine line between being vulnerable. I think vulnerability is amazing. It's a tool, and it's a strength as opposed to a weakness. But you do have to choose your audience wisely. And so I think protecting that information and knowing that you're in a safe place when you share it is very, very important.
Yeah. And being prepared, even if you think it's a safe place, because sometimes that's what happens. You think it is somebody that is going to be safe, and then they say something that just totally catches you off guard and hurts. Maybe even more so because you thought they were going to be a safe place, you know?
Absolutely.
So you got to be cautious. But what's interesting is when we think of the marital relationship as compared with like our friendships over the years, it's interesting how we put marriage at this pinnacle that is supposed to be perfect and last a lifetime, when there's really no other relationship in our lives that does that without fail. And we don't really beat ourselves up too much, or certainly not near as much, when a friendship fades away, or we lose touch with someone over the years, or even when a family rift gets divided for years at a time sometimes. But it's just weird to me. And I'm curious what you think is the reason why that primary romantic relationship holds such a place of significance to us, because I think what that does is create more of an arena for shame.
I agree. And absolutely, it has been my kind of last arena to tackle. I'm not saying that the work I've done in the recent past has been, that I'm this, evolved person. Everything requires ongoing work. But when I recognized that I was feeling shame in all aspects of my life, and that I've never felt like a very confident person, I started doing work on feeling more confident. I started thinking differently about my career. I spent years in the ER, and I became a more confident ER physician. I became a more competent and confident parent, and that's hard to do, because parenting is another place where we often find a lot of shame. Felt like I was a really confident in my ability to be a good friend, but I honestly took many, many years to recognize that I needed to concentrate on how to be successful, or to choose wisely my next relationship. And I really avoided it. When I look back and I think about all of the self-work that I've done, it wasn't by design that I put that one off until last. But I think it's because I honestly don't know. I don't know. I think I just felt so much, again, shame in the ways that I had experienced relationships in the past that I just felt like it might be the hardest. Maybe that was it.
Yeah.
But I feel like the work that I've done recently has put me in a place where I now feel like I have the tools to, in a future relationship, have the relationship that I've been looking for my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
What's nice is it puts you in a place of being excited about your future instead of looking backward about how, I've been alone for a long time. I'm a single mom. You let go of that. When you let go of that shame, it puts you in a place where you can look forward to your future.
Mm-hmm. Sure does. Yeah. How much do you think this has to do with maybe being rooted in like family belief systems from our parents or grandparents? Like they stayed and made it work till death, even if they were miserable or being abused. Why do we think we can just walk away and start over? Like I feel like there's a lot that has to do with that somehow generationally.
Absolutely. Nailed that. You don't even know what my background is, but absolutely. I will say that my parents are still married and they have not had an easy road, to be honest. But I appreciate the fact that they're still married. But when I was younger and I was being modeled a relationship, I would say it probably wasn't the healthiest relationship to be viewing as somebody who was deciding what marriage looked like. And so, yeah, absolutely. And then part of the decision to get married or even to stay in a marriage or even to choose someone, it was not about choosing somebody that was right. It was just the fact that once I got married, then that was it. There wasn't any turning back. So that was absolutely modeled to me that divorce was not really an option.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah. In fact, my second divorce, my parents, I imagine, will listen to this at some point. But
yeah, you always have to be careful.
My second divorce.
Who's going to hear this?
Yeah. But they actually know this, I'm pretty sure. So my husband at the time and we were separated and he had moved to Texas to take a job and we'd kind of made some decisions about this was definitely over. And most of my close friends knew. I kind of was starting to talk about it more with even people that I didn't know very well. I was over the idea that, there was going to be another divorce, but I seriously didn't tell my parents for like 6 months. They were the very last people I told. And that took me a long time to learn to create some boundaries with, or maybe not boundaries, but at least not feel like I had to share everything like we've already touched on. Yeah. So that was actually even kind of a powerful thing. By the time I told them, it was pretty much done. And I knew that whatever they had to say wasn't going to affect me. Yeah. Kind of like we've already talked about, but they were the very last people I told. And they're now, they're over that.
Well, the thing is, you do learn as you go. And I think, when you need to set boundaries and just keep something close to the vest, and there's nothing wrong with that for whatever reason that it happened. And, also, we don't want to discount the value of a long-term marriage or a marriage that truly does last until death do they part. The possibility that marriage can last forever is why we get married, right? I mean, but the thing is, when that requires two willing parties who are able to work through any given issue, because like we've said, relationships are hard. And, we want to honor the people that have put in the hard work and gotten over the humps and made it to the other side and are maybe better for it. But what we want to do also is just to encourage people that are maybe, we're seeing kind of a trend of what they call silver divorce, which is people that are getting divorced in their 60s and even 70s because they're finally feeling strong enough to say, this just isn't working for me, and to choose the stronger, better path that they didn't know was available or they didn't think was available all those years earlier. And for whatever reason that people stay together or don't stay together, I think the thing to acknowledge is that there shouldn't be shame regardless, because we all do what we do for the reasons that we hold value in at that time. And so I think that's the important point that we're trying to make today.
Absolutely. And I really honestly, at some point in my life, when I thought about my parents' marriage, I felt like, oh, I can do this better. Like I knew that if I had been in their shoes that I wouldn't have stayed. However, when I look at them now, and I think they're happier than they've ever been, and they've been married 52 years this year, I look at that and I find inspiration in it, because I think that if I ever get married again, I will use them for inspiration, because a relationship is definitely hard. Even successful, just compatible, loving relationships, you're still going to have some hard pieces to that. And so I absolutely respect my parents' decision to stay together, and I find beauty in it. Just wasn't my path, but I think it's lovely to be able to look at their relationship now and recognize all the strengths in it when I used to look at the weaknesses.
Today's show is sponsored by Dr. Ann Morgan, CEO, lead physician, and founder of Thrive Once More. Dr. Morgan is a board-certified emergency medicine physician who over the past 5 years has been researching and continuing her education in developing this private practice that emphasizes wellness and patient health optimization. Are you interested in becoming a healthier version of yourself? Life is too short to spend every day feeling exhausted, overstimulated, overwhelmed, and just not like yourself. At Thrive Once More, Dr. Ann Morgan will use a comprehensive approach in evaluating your current state of health and developing an individualized strategy to achieve balance and health through nutrition and optimizing your hormones. Explore what the healthier you could look like with Dr. Ann Morgan. The name of her practice, Thrive Once More, really sums up Dr. Morgan's goals for her patients. Visit thriveoncemore.com, where you can register, learn more, and schedule your first consultation. Please tell her that you heard about her on Starting Over Stronger. Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of pieces to this, but one interesting consideration is something that we've actually talked about on the show recently, and that is the way that we put language around things. And we've kind of even talked about that already today with the use of the word completion rather than failure when we talk about the marriage. But there's a lot of ways that we language things as we go through the divorce that actually make the shame worse. And I think it's things like breaking up and failed marriage and broken home and all of these, terms that just imply something negative. And so one way that we can offset some shame in our life is to choose different words around the things that we talk about with our friends and our family and with ourselves in our own minds, just to think of things differently. Maybe a broken home is one that stays married and continues to pass on dysfunctional traits to the children. What if, the ending of an abusive or toxic relationship isn't a break at all? Maybe it's a healing, So it's really just important to be careful of the words that we use around things. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Oh, I totally agree. And honestly, I love that you kept me accountable when you said, hey, I heard you use the word failure already a couple of times. And that just shows the power of those words that we use, because I'm not sure that I would have recognized that I was using it.
Yeah, no, most people don't.
You get so ingrained. And even though my emotional tie to the word failure probably isn't near as strong as it definitely isn't near as strong as it used to be. It's still the way I describe what I've been through, but I love the idea of changing the language too. Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think there's any special considerations for having gone through more than one divorce that would change anything of what we've talked about?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if we want to jump ahead to kind of what my life looks like now, but my first thought when you asked me that question was, yes, I think that a special consideration for me in particular is that shame can creep back in sometimes, even though I am a much more confident person. I am a much better equipped person to handle my future, whether it be in whatever arena, whether it's friends, parenting, career, romantic relationships. I feel like I've done a lot of great work recently to get to the person where I feel I'm confident and comfortable in my own skin, which is a great place to be. However, this is interesting. So, when I ended this last long-term relationship back in November, I thought, you know what, the reason I ended this was because I'm a more confident person. I can get right back out there and I am ready to design my life. I did a vision board. I think there's wonderful work there. I was really envisioning what I wanted for my future in all arenas, but also in my romantic relationships. And I wasn't afraid of getting back out there. I had decided that I was going to start dating, and if dating didn't go well with one person, then I was ready to move on. And so I did that. And I was feeling really empowered by going on a date or two with someone. And if it didn't work out, then it didn't mean the end of the world. I could just date someone.
Yeah.
And so it was a wonderful place to be. But actually, recently, I've been dating somebody in the last couple of months. Well, it's been almost 4 months now. And it was amazing. It's been amazing because I really have prayed about it. I have envisioned exactly what I wanted out of a relationship. And all of a sudden, I kind of had it. And so I was on cloud nine for probably 2.5 months or so, 3 months maybe. And then shame crept back in. And even though nothing had changed in this relationship, this man is amazing. And I feel very blessed, continue to feel blessed to be in a relationship with him, whether it ends in marriage or not. I mean, that doesn't even enter my equation. I am just really enjoying finding someone who feels like my person. Just in the last couple of weeks, I started having some thoughts, some anxiety about the idea that who am I? I have failed at 3. And again, there's that word. It just came out just like that.
Yeah.
I have completed in a painful way 3 long-term relationships in my life. And I started to have a lot of self-doubt about whether or not I was someone who, one, deserved a good relationship. And so what multiple attempts at love have taught me was to pay attention to my gut. So what I have done is, as soon as started creeping in, even though nothing else had changed, I started paying attention to it quickly. Mm-hmm. I haven't done formal counseling with a therapist since my decision surrounding my first divorce, so 20 plus years ago. Mm-hmm. But I, this week, sought out a counselor because I knew that this relationship was going really well, and I was about to self-sabotage it if I started to let that thought creep in. So I don't know if that makes sense, but what I've discovered with these relationships is that I absolutely don't want to go down that road again. And there's no reason why this one needs to head that direction. It's not me. It's I need to pay attention to what's going on in my brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know what I love that you said? I wrote it down.
Oh, really?
What multiple attempts at love has taught me. I mean, think about that. That is so powerful. That's exactly what we're talking about. Stop shaming yourself. It's taught you something. You're a different and stronger and smarter person because of what multiple attempts at love have taught you. That's awesome. Yeah. That's incredible.
I feel I'm better equipped. And as soon as I named what I was kind of feeling in the back of my mind and didn't shove it away, I'm so empowered. After that first, I sought out a relationship counselor.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. And as soon as I got off my call with her, I was like, oh yeah, okay, I got this. There's no reason to start to question. It was amazing. So I feel like my experience has taught me how to pay attention to myself a little bit better.
Yeah.
This is something I don't know if we have time to talk about this, but I think there's so much shame. So shame and goes with self-confidence issues, me. I think if we're confident people, we don't, and I don't mean confident on the surface. I don't mean like braggadocious kind of,
right.
To the world, you look confident, but inside you're not. But confidence, someone recently told me, they asked me, what is the root word of confidence? And I thought for a minute, and I was like, oh gosh, this feels like an
English test that's not bad.
Yeah, okay, I want to make sure I pick right. But I recognized pretty quickly that the word confident is confide, right?
Yeah, right.
So she suggested, and I thought this was really powerful, confidence is confiding in yourself and paying attention to that gut feeling or that inner voice that I have squelched for so long. And so I have become confident in a lot of different arenas. But I don't know that I've felt confident in my ability to be in a romantic relationship. And so knowing that if I'm starting to listen, so I was almost proud of myself for listening to my gut in the last couple of weeks and recognizing, there's something here that needs to be paid attention to, because I think that a less confident version of myself would have just squelched that and continued to let it kind of smolder and then come out in other ways. And so I liked that image that confidence is confiding in yourself.
I like that. That's awesome. You know, you said something earlier about red flags, and I think that this kind of sums up what you're describing now, that you feel this more confident self, that you're feeling better about your ability to see those red flags, perhaps. And that is a place that you want to get to, for sure. Everyone wants to get to after, starting over again after divorce. And I think I have this funny little saying that I made up, that you can't see red flags when you're wearing rose-colored glasses.
That's awesome.
I love it because it's so true, right? I mean, like, you literally can't.
But
life has this way of taking those rose-colored glasses off. And, you can look at that as a negative, or you can look at it as a reality. And it is just that. It's a reality that life has good and bad. And we can have a better life, not by focusing on the bad by any means, but by being able to see it clearly for what it is, so that we can choose differently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what I felt like I did, in the past couple of weeks, is recognize something that I wouldn't have seen if I kept my rose-colored glasses on. And it wasn't even something that had to do with him. It was really about me. So I just feel like I've been blessed to get to a point where I'm really paying attention and giving my inner thoughts some validation. And, somebody that helped me, I have to give a shout out to our friend, Susan Harrison, about confidence. Confidence is something that she preaches and teaches, and I took her class a couple of years ago, and it has really helped me in all arenas. But the last frontier was romantic relationships, and I do some of the things that she kind of taught me in that sense. But it's been the hardest front so far. But it's all work, and it's ongoing, and I guess that's my point, is that getting over shame is not a one and done kind of thing.
No, it is.
Exactly. But I mean, I felt so empowered in the last, year. Well, really more than a year. I've been kind of working hard on myself for a while, but I felt so empowered when I start to recognize that I'm doing better and better and better. I'm becoming the person that I really have always wanted to be. Mm-hmm. But part of that work is recognizing when it needs to be readdressed and getting it done quicker than letting it smolder. So yeah. I was pretty proud of myself. I'll have to just give myself a pat on the back for recognizing that recently. And it's been good.
I'm proud of you too. And I'm glad that you can feel that pride in yourself. That's the goal, is to get through all this shame and to stare it down and make it go away, because you have that confidence to know that you've been through this. You know what you need and what you want, and you know how to get it. And if you don't, you know how to find a way to get it, to get the help you need so that you can get it. You're smarter and stronger than you probably feel most of the time. I know that's true for me. So I thank you again for being here today, though, for opening your heart to share your story and just giving us the wisdom that your story has given you. And before we close today, I wanted to ask if you would share with us just a little bit about what Thrive Once More is, about your medical experience and the journey that has brought you to that, and tell us what you do now.
Absolutely. And one of the things that as you said, finding resources and recognizing that there are places to get help. Mm-hmm. Kudos to you, Annie. Like, your podcast is amazing. And even though I'm not currently dealing with a divorce, I love listening to it. It's awesome. There's so much empowerment there. And I get so much inspiration from people that are doing brave things, particularly women that are doing brave things like you are. I have really enjoyed kind of getting to know you by listening to your podcast. So I'm so thankful that your audience has you as a resource, because it can be such a powerful tool.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And, to be honest, that's kind of how I feel about what I do for women as well, in a different way, and men as well. I actually see men and women in my practice, but my practice is called Thrive Once More. I spent 20 years in the emergency room as an ER doctor, and I did a good job at it, but it was never really my passion. But as I have developed what I call integrative care practice, where I preach and teach, I do a lot of education on lifestyle, nutrition, exercise, mindfulness, spirituality, how important all of those things are. But then I also combine the building blocks of bioidentical hormone replacement, thyroid optimization. So what I'm really doing is I feel like I am equipping my patients to handle the stress of life, because life generally doesn't get any easier.
Sure doesn't.
And so I kind of feel like I do something similar to maybe what you do too. And that is kind of helping people become better equipped to handle the things in life that are hard. And find some joy in them as well. And what I always say that I was very intentional when I named my practice, because I really want to help people thrive once more.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. And I absolutely love it. I am so, again, I'll pat myself on the back. I'm very proud of myself for making a huge career change. And, you know, it's a evolving thing. And I work my next week, I work my last ER shift ever. And I'm just super excited about it. I've kind of kept my toe in both rings for a while, but I am ready to completely devote every moment of my day to developing my new practice. And so it's been a wonderful journey, and one that I find so rewarding, really being with my patients and helping them navigate traditionally menopause, but really just navigating life is really what I try to help people do, and give them the equipment to do it as well as they can.
Awesome. Well, I want listeners to be able to find you if they're interested in learning more. And if I recall correctly, your website is thriveoncemore.com, correct?
Correct.
Very good. And listeners, I would love for you to reach out to me, and I will be able to make a personal introduction for you to Dr. Ann Morgan and her lovely Thrive Once More practice. Just send me an email. And again, my email is Annie@startingoverstronger.com. I think that it really is a lot similar to what I do in the divorce arena and in the world of life transition, is really just to give people the tools. And for me, it probably is more practical and emotional tools, whereas for you, it's more physical tools to be able to redefine their life in a way that they don't live a constantly overwhelmed and anxious lifestyle. And so I think that we're doing very similar work in different ways that complement each other very well. So I thank you very much again for being here. And listeners, thank you for tuning in. It's a pleasure to meet you here every Wednesday to talk about the issues that matter to you as you go through and recover from your divorce. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you again in a week. Thank you for tuning in. And remember, as you divorce, there is help as you go through the process and hope as you are starting over stronger.